In a recent video I made about DBX discs, a few people noticed that I'd started using a new amplifier. I wanted to know more about this, so the purpose of this video is to talk about that. Now, previously to that amp, I'd been using a Pioneer SX3600. I got this off eBay a couple of years ago, beautiful retro amp. Really like the look of it, but I'd ended up just using the auxiliary in. I'd stopped using the phonograph input because I'd got a separate phono preamp, and just using the auxiliary input wasn't enough input, so I'd got this thing, the Onkyo U30. You might have seen the video about this, which enabled me to plug more things into that amp, but it added its own set of extra complications. Example, the missus said one day, how the heck am I supposed to play a record? And of course the thing doesn't have any labels on it, it just says tuner and phono, and everything was in a different input to what you'd expect it to be. If you had the switches in the wrong position, everything sounded terrible. And also there was two separate preamps on it. You had to switch between the two and make sure all the buttons were in the right position. Yeah, a bit of a nightmare for someone to use that didn't know where everything was. And to be honest, for me, I ended up flicking things in random positions until things played. So not ideal, although loved the look of that one as well. So I had to bite the bullet and realise that the situation that I got myself into just wasn't what I wanted to be. I needed to simplify things down. Now, the Pioneer SX3600 I had wasn't a high-end amp by any stretch of the imagination. You can find them on eBay at pretty decent prices. What you were looking for if you want a proper retro amp is something like the Pioneer SX1980, but as you can see, those prices are crazy. The only reason I think I'd stuck with the SX3600 so long was because of this lovely blue VU meter display, but you can't just hold on to an amp because of a display. So just like an old car, sometimes it's time to change and move on. So the SX3600 had to go, and then what do I get next? Well, my main issue is to do with inputs, so I wrote down a list of the things that I needed in a new amp. The first one is it's got to have a lot of RCA inputs. And then I wanted it to have programmable input labels, so I knew what each of those things were by looking at the front of it. And then I wanted one button per input. I didn't want to have to flick through a menu of things to choose an input. I just wanted to press a button to get straight to it. And then more common things like a tape loop and a nice silver finish, and it's got to be good quality as well. But those top three, those are the very important three that must be on the amp, and when you restrict it down to those, very hard to find an amp that complies with all those three things. But I did end up managing to find one, and the model I picked was the Cambridge Audio Azur 851A. /S, the S is for silver. This is a picture of the black one. Now, it's supposed to be a very good amplifier. It's got a toroidal transformer. That's supposed to be a good thing, according to them. Class XD, yeah, supposedly that's brilliant as well. Won lots of awards or got plaudits or people liked it, put it that way. Now, if you're the kind of person that likes to read specs about other people's amplifiers, press pause, they're on screen now, but there were just two specs I was really interested in. Number one, lots of inputs, there you can see on the right, 9 RCA inputs, brilliant. And number two, I wanted a nice clear display that I could select things in plain English, and it's got that as well. The other spec, look at the top there, the price, £1,200. Could not afford that, and yet, as you can see here, I've got one. So what happened? Well, I shopped around for a while, for quite a few months. I managed to find one that was a second or a return or something like that, but it was well under half that price, which is still a lot of money for me, but if it works, then it's going to solve all my problems. So let's have a look at it. Nicely packaged. I say it's supposed to be sort of return or refurbished or something like that, but it looks pretty much brand new. There's your outputs on that side on the back, and then inputs on this side. And at the top there, if we have a look, on the right, top right, that's number one, with RCAs, and then next to them XLRs, and number two with RCAs and XLRs, and then down at the bottom they go from right to left, you can see, with a tape output. Written upside down there as well, so you can read it by looking over the top. That makes sense, that's thinking ahead. Lovely heavy weight thing. Couldn't hold it up at arm's length for more than a second or so. Got a big vent on the top here to let all the heat out, and it does get pretty hot as well. However, it does have all sorts of protection things. If it gets too hot, it'll shut itself down. If you plug it in wrong, it'll shut itself down. It knows basically to protect itself, which is a good thing. Right, I'll spin it around and let you have a look at the front of it. It's very heavy, this thing. I'm having to do it in these little small movements, but there you go. That looks pretty nice. Now, you can see on the left there, standby, headphone out, two sets of speakers, IR receiver, got that screen in the middle with the buttons either side. The only issue I got with it, the only thing that looked a little bit sort of worn, as though it had been used before, were these two buttons here for bass and treble. These are the only plastic parts on it, and there you can see the paint's been scraped off. It's black plastic underneath and it's sort of sprayed with silver. Don't really know what's happened there, but presumably it was on display somewhere perhaps and it's got scratched. I'm not too sure, but that's the only issue I've got with it at all. Now this also means I can get rid of the Onkyo U30, which as much as I like it was causing additional complications. So I can unplug all these things, and this time round I'm going to label everything up so I know what things are. So I'm using some duct tape here. I've tried other methods in the past, but it's always come undone when I've had a look around the back after a couple of years. Hopefully this will stay stuck. Now because of the amount of things I was plugging into this took me perhaps a whole weekend. One thing I did do, remove the caps off the end of these speaker binding posts, because I'm going to put banana plugs into those. In Europe they have to sell those with little caps on the end so people don't plug the wrong things into them or something like that. Anyway, there's the bottom if you wanted to have a look at that. You can see heavyweight construction, big bolt goes through the middle of that thing, through that transformer. Anyway, got everything labelled up, plugged them in, and putting it back into my HiFi system here. There is room above that, might not look like it, there's quite a bit of ventilation room, so don't worry, and again it'll shut itself down if there was a problem, which it hasn't done in the weeks I've been using it. This is a few weeks after the installation, so let me demonstrate it to you now. Now you can see I've labelled up all my components already, and to select them it's as simple as pressing the button next to the label. Now there's 4 either side. You can see the top 3 on this side, and then at the bottom there's record in, which is slightly different. I'll explain that one in a moment. Now on the back you'll notice at the top source 1 and source 2 have XLR inputs as well as RCA inputs. RCA is unbalanced and XLR is balanced. Now you can select between those two as well, so if we go back to the front of the machine you can see that if we want to select number 1 we press that there, but if we press it again it says balance. That means it's gone to the XLR input, and you get a little circle around it there. So you can have 2 things on those ones. So even though it's just got one label, you can actually have the XLR and the RCA as separate inputs. So if I do ever get anything with an XLR output, I can plug them in the back. Now if you hold down on the input selector, you get this screen here, and that's where you label up the device that you've plugged into it. So you can see that I've got as vinyl. Now if I move the cursor to the right by pressing that button there, select the letter by spinning around the volume knob at the end here, change it to the annoying term vinyls, which I'll delete in a second. There we go. But yeah, that's how you change them. And you can see we've got the volume control on the right here, but if we go into this we can make that into a balance control to select between, of course, left and right. There's quite a few sort of hidden things in here. Also, if we hold down that mode button on the left there, it gets into an additional menu, and there's other things that you can change. For example, the LCD brightness we can change in here as a default. You can also change it off the remote control as well. And then on the right here we've got volume decibels, or volume as just a normal number indicator. You see it was showing decibels before, now it's just showing sort of 1 to 100 or something if we spin that dial around. Now if you're one of those audiophile purists that think that bass and treble controls are the devil's work, you can press a direct button to bypass them entirely. However, if you're a bit more normal, you can control the bass and treble. As you can see here, I've spray painted those now with silver spray paint. You can't tell there was ever anything wrong with them. Now the remote control that comes with this is quite a comprehensive one. It's designed for other items in the range, CD players and things with transport controls. However, if you look down the bottom here, we've got 1 button per input, so we can jump directly to whatever input we want by pressing the corresponding button. And above the centre part, of course, we've got the ability to adjust the volume and mute and select speakers A or B, adjust the balance and adjust the brightness of the display as well. I don't really use the remote control too much. I suppose the only time I'd use it would be to adjust the volume or press mute, or you can turn it off from there as well, or at least into standby, of course. Now, I suppose this is the part where I'm supposed to get all hi-fi journalist on you and tell you how great the sound is, how rich it is. It's got a punchy bass, beautiful mid-range, crisp trebles. I can't tell you any of that stuff. I haven't got a clue. For me, an amplifier, whatever you plug into it, it makes it louder. And if it doesn't add sort of buzzes and whines and crackles and hiss, then that's fine by me. And this doesn't. It sounds great as far as I can tell, but I can't tell you how great compared to other amps. It just sounds fine. So on my score, it sounds good. It works well, it's put together well. Have I had any problems with it at all? No, nothing. So that's my review. It's a good amp. I got it for the inputs, really, for the way that it works rather than how it sounds. It sounds fine. There's a few things I'd like to have. I'd like to have it with a built-in digital converter. Perhaps a phono preamp built-in would have been nice, would have saved me another plug socket. And of course I'd love some nice big VU meters on the front, but that's not going to happen, is it? I got it for all these inputs on the back. And does it work through all those inputs? Yes, it does. And that means I can plug all sorts of weird things into this. I can label them up on the screen. It's very obvious what I'm playing, what the volume is. Lovely. I can't complain about it at all. And it does sound great. It sounds really good. Whether it sounds better than other amps, I couldn't tell you. Whatever source you're listening to is sent out to the record loop, but if you want to listen back to that, you press the record in button. I've got that plugged into this graphic equalizer. Now don't panic, I might not be always equalizing graphics. I can use it as a spectrum analyzer, and I can also use it to select different tape inputs and outputs. It gives me another couple of tape loops, and I can plug things like that DBX decoder into there as well. So it enables me to have more flexibility. That's why that's there. Now I'll go through the different components actually. People might be interested in this. There's a Pioneer BDP 170S Blu-ray player for CD, SACD, DVD audio, Blu-ray audio. Now below that I've got a Sony L cassette. That's sort of hanging around at the moment. I'm not using it too much, but I do like it being there. I might swap that out at some point. Now I've also got a cassette deck, a Pioneer CTF 1250. That's there to play cassettes and look cool. I don't really need it though, because I've got another cassette deck over here below my 8-track, which is a Pioneer HR99, which I can record 8 tracks onto or play them back. I've got this Sony, which I showed you in a previous video. That's hanging around there because it does Dolby S recording. That's perhaps the main deck that I'm using if I want to put anything onto tape at the moment. This is my favourite thing that I've ever bought for a hi-fi, possibly one of my best consumer electronics items ever, the Sony HAP-S1. I use it to play back all my digital files, high-res files, and also that works as a digital converter. Got a couple of things plugged into that, including I've got this DCC player. Now this is a recent acquisition, very hard to get hold of this one, the Philips DCC91, the only narrow DCC player made, excluding the portables. I needed a smaller one to fit into this space. It took me a heck of a lot of time to get hold of that one, because I don't think very many of those were made. Anyway, managed to pick that one up. And of course we've got the beautiful Sansui XR Q7 turntable on the top here. I've got a Perspex cover on that now that I ordered on eBay. It's not for it, it's just a general one, but it fits. Tefifon KC1, as you've seen in previous videos, and the Tube Box S, which is the preamp for the turntable. That's on top of the reel-to-reel, and the reel-to-reel is the Pioneer RT909. So there you go, that's everything that's plugged into the hi-fi at the minute. Oh, by the way, the speakers are Polk Audio RTI A5s. I only got them because I like the way they looked and I could get them on Amazon delivered to the UK. That was pretty much the only reason that those are there, but I do think they sound pretty decent as well. So that's the state of the hi-fi at the moment. Things will change, of course. I've got other things I want to plug into there. That DBX decoder can fit down the bottom somewhere. I've got a couple of other components I want to show you in coming months, but for the moment, that's it. And as always, thanks for watching.